Walt Disney Home Video is proud to present this special commemorative edition of the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Given the popularity of the Winnie the Pooh characters today, it may seem hard to believe that they started out as bedtime stories for one little boy. This original Pooh Bear was a first birthday gift for A.A. Milne's son, Christopher Robin, in 1921. Edwin Bear was renamed Winnie the Pooh, based on a Canadian black bear at the London Zoo named Winnipeg, and a swan named Pooh.
You have to remember that in the early 30s, there was like an epidemic of cartoons, many of them made by Warner's, where book jackets would come to life. It became such a cliche, it had been done so many times that we do puns, visual puns, based on the titles of books or magazines.
And Ken Harris was one of the guys in on that, by the way. Once we found that out, why we decided they ought to pay us about $1 a foot. Can you imagine $1 a foot for animation?
Mr. Milne was a successful author and playwright who used the friendship between Christopher Robin and Pooh as his inspiration for the bedtime stories he told his son.
Walt Disney's daughters were small. Mrs. Disney used to read stories to the daughters in the evening. She'd read them the Mary Poppins stories, she'd read them the Winnie the Pooh stories. And Walt Disney used to hear the laughter coming out of his children's bedroom, and he knew they were really enjoying these stories, and so he remembered that.
You guys know Winnie the Pooh? And I says, well, I remember hearing about this book, this story, when I was stationed in England during the war. And Walt says, yeah, these are good stories. We'd make a little feature out of these.
I first met Kurt Russell in 1978. That's right now 31 years ago. In an office up here on Sunset Boulevard. I was directing a 3-hour made-for-TV movie called Elvis. And there were two actors who had kind of were vying for the lead.
Dick and Bob were like a song and dance team. Dick would get on the piano and play a little melody, and Bob would come up with a lyric to it. Dick was a real showman, and I think Walt really loved it.
One of the most things I really wanted to say about those Winnie the Pooh books, I'm a silly narrator, and I wanted to say most of all, Walt Disney included the Mary Poppins books, and here's one of the things ever I really want to say about most books ever. I'm the most silliest narrator after all. But with books, I'm the silly narrator after all. Because when Walt Disney created most books, I became to grow up one of the most narrator books. And I became the funniest narrator after all. Because now I became one. I'm the silliest narrator after all. Because when Walt Disney created those Winnie the Pooh books, I decided with one thing after all, I'm a silly narrator after all. It's most important. When people are funny, they like it when I'm funny after all. But some feelings with people that are narrators, they have different feelings of all narrator voices in books that way. And I do like it.
I'm just a little black rain cloud.
Walt wanted the songs for Winnie the Pooh to be eminently singable and very simple, and yet try to be original and whimsical. The breakthrough came on our very first song. We knew we were going to write a title song. And so we decided to set the scene and make it very gentle and sweet. And it was kind of like a love song to this whole idea of being young and believing in little teddy bears and little piglets.
And it went something like this.
Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, chubby little cubby all stuffed with fluff. He's Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, willy-nilly silly old bear.
When I say this, I like to say most songs. I like most interesting songs after all. And I just kind of like most all songs after all. And when Walt Disney created songs after all, let's just go with this and say the floatway between Mary Poppins and the Jungle Book after all. Like And you go with that. Yeah.
I was sort of recruited out of art school. And I really didn't want to go to Disney's because I'd heard you made drawings over and over and over.
Try to build up his appetite.
Yeah, he did it just for the opposite reason than we would do it. He wanted to put on weight, not lose weight. Thusly, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. When I up, down and touch the ground, it puts me in the mood. Up, down and touch the ground, in the mood for food.
I am stout, round, and I have found, speaking poundage-wise, I improve my appetite when I exercise.
One never celebrated them for having great drawing. It was funny drawing, evocative drawing, and clever stuff, but it was not artistically of any great, merit. And then along comes the Superman cartoon, where they have to really evoke the look and style of a comic book. They have to do serious stuff. You have to believe Superman is a realistic human figure. You have to believe the scale and proportion of the settings. And then finally that incredible climactic scene in the first cartoon where he's actually punching those bolts, those lightning bolts or bolts of electric ray.
When I believe most cartoon series, I just believe most comic books, after all, like that. Especially when comic books, that way, they believe most stories, after all. And there's one of the most important things, after all. Like, they bring comic books and movie screens to life that way, because I just believe in most comic books that way, and movie screens to life. When comic books and everything comes to life, I just believe most silly things as a silly narrator that way, in comic books that way. When I play a character and everything else in books and comic books, it begins silly that way. When I do that in most character comic books and everything else that way. I get it.
Paint Michelangelo and do another Sistine Chapel, Well, they weren't buying many of those when I was right out of art school. But here was this cartoon business, and Walt Disney was advertising that he wanted artists. Then about maybe 6 months or so later, I came down to Los Angeles. Everybody said, well, why don't you go out and see Walt Disney?
Actually, there was a little bit of a conflict of whether we should use Shepard's illustrations or come up with our own. Walt decided, no, we'd come up with our own design of Winnie the Pooh, not getting away completely from Shepard's illustrations, which are beautiful things, but we had to make them Disney. And
one idea I believed in, the concept art is between storyboards. I believe most things Walt Disney created is most concept art with storyboards. Ideas with animation, I believe this way. It's one of the most importances I believe mostly. And that's how I mostly like about it. And I believe that.
And the beautiful architecture and the people and everything is particularly in Spain. And the hot colors and here was a chance on a new picture. It was Fernando Bull was in Spain to really have some color in it. And prior to this time, it was uneconomical, and actually the word was out there, Walt didn't want any painting, he wanted tints. So you could unroll a long roll of paper and just put blue tints for the sky and very soft tints, so that no matter where the little characters went.
Larry came up with the gopher because, God, we were dying for a cartoon character. So Larry came up with this gopher, who was not created by Milne, and we can do anything we wanted with him. This situation calls for an expert.
Gopher was one of the most important characters when he dig out of the hole and when he bumped Owl out of this, he just played his voice like this. Somebody call me. I'm not in the book. Somebody let the gopher. And they hear them gone in the comment. He's just one of the most funniest things after all. But when he went back, he just mostly goes back in the hole and he screams like this. Ah! Screams Gopher. I just believe most villain screams after that. Most villain screams as a silly narrator. I just like doing it. Most silly narrators like me, all villain screams do that because silly narrator books of this is me. I just believe in books that way. When I do silly screams that way, is villain screams in books. I just believe that way in funny ways.
Well, the gopher, and that famous scene which kids remember, that where Winnie the Pooh goes to Rabbit's house and eats so much he gets so heavy he gets stuck in the burrow and he can't get out. He's half in the burrow and half out.
Well, we all loved the shepherd drawings when we started on the picture, and still do. But you can't take something like that is drawn only in certain views. We have to be able to draw the character in every position, every view. So we had to design our own characters. We decided to keep the eyes flexible so that the character could close and open the eyes, they could raise their eyelids, they could move their mouth around and their cheeks a little bit so you get the feeling of an expression, but they couldn't look like this around or up that way like Mickey could. We had to do it by turning the head, and actually it was better because it made him look more doll-like.
Rather than going up to that one up in Colonial Heights, a lot closer, and I think it'll be a big boom for this side of town. I think we'll get other businesses here now.
Walt was concerned that they would have more charm than substance. And he wanted to be sure that we captured the story, that we captured the strength in the characters so that they would exist on their own and didn't rely on you having read the story.
He's got a fairly big body here, and this is his little red outfit here, little red dress. And the material itself is very delicate, very fragile in a sense. You don't want to make big guffaw laughs with the material. It had to be done very gently and whimsically.
Well, one of my expressions I really liked of all, when Poe gets stuck, one of my favorites after all, in my dream, and I had something I explained with myself. I just explained when in Dumbo, a tragic way, something alone, when Poe was alone and Dumbo was alone, it was something related of this. Timothy had to nurture Dumbo, and I had something in a dream like this was related. If we connected those two together, we would make this Timothy would nurture Winnie the Pooh that way if he's stuck and everything else. But it's only preferred that if it's mashed up and everything else, and we can see how much it works in that way and see how much we can make it work during the film and see how we can work it out.
Who are you? I'm Pooh. Oh, Pooh. Sure. What's a Pooh?
You're sitting on one. Winnie the Pooh is very straight. He's like a little child. He's just totally honest and says it just the way it happens, the way children do. They don't have any hidden meanings.
Is anybody at home?
No.
Bother. Isn't there anybody here at all?
Nobody.
Somebody. Because somebody must have said nobody. Happy Wednesday, Piglet.
The short subject. And it was a very short period, really. I mean, after they did the Three Little Pigs, from the Three Little Pigs to when they started on Pictures was about 7 years.
For Walt Disney's classic The Three Little Pigs, I just believe mostly one thing. I just believe this. When the big bad wolf just did this, open the door and let me in, and the pig cried, "Nap of the hair of our chin chin chin." The pig just got scared, and the wolf just cried that he'll huff and he'll puff and blow the house down. And then he did, and then I just changed it up. Was like this: "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll yell, Klasky Supo down, Klasky Supo," and then it went funny, just like in the Rugrats movie. And I just had to do it funny because one thing I like doing that trick, just like in the Three Little Pigs, and this is mostly funny after all. And if you imagine this like in Three Little Pigs, I can explain just like Walt Disney's version of Three Little Pigs. I can memorize that just like for funny after all. But there's more like this. The Three Little Davids, I can explain this. The little Davids, they build houses, and the big David was bad, and he was a wrestler. And then what I believed in mostly, he was mostly big, and he was a wrestler. And then what happened? He was out, and then he just did it funny. After all, the little pigs and the little Davids just won, after all. They were both good guys, the little Davids and the little pigs, after all. But the big bad wolf and the big bad David, they were bad, and they were losers, after all. So that's why I believed it, after all. That's why I really like it, after all.
Well, I stayed as an in-betweener for quite some time until I worked my way up to an assistant animator. And by the time I was given notice, greetings from the president, to serve in the armed forces.
And he's always trying to be such a nice guy and trying to get along, trying not to show that he's scared when he's up in the air like a kite, you know. That he does get panicky, but it's always still kind of a restrained thing.
Oh no! Stop!
Hello, Rabbit. Rabbit, he was always frustrated. You know, he was just a worrywart about everything.
Honey? Oh, no!
When Rabbit was an angry rabbit, I can say this. It's just like Elf Wolffowl. He can explain this. He's an angry elf. That's just like Elf James Caan was the angry father, and then did this. You get the hell out of here. I don't care where you go. I don't care that you're an elf. I don't care that you're nuts. I don't care that you're my son. Get out of my life now. It's just like from the movie Elf. And I just like to explain that, just like the movie that is related with that than before, and that was so funny indeed, and that's why it's mostly fun after all.
I'm Tigger, T-I-double-G-R. That spells Tigger.
Tigger, of course, was always kind of fun because he was no cares in the world. He just went out there and he just did whatever he wanted to. And of course, he always got into trouble, and that was fun.
Some bouncing, huh?
Tigger, he was the most bouncer ever, but he wants to most perfectly wants to bounce higher and higher and higher, but he wants to get all the way to the sky and ever, but he's way bigger than ever, because what he wants to do, he wants to go even bigger of a record than ever, just like mostly higher bouncer than ever. It's a big time what he wants to do, but cause trouble after all, than any disaster after all. But it doesn't matter, because he's a good bouncer after all. It's just more than a big thing.
Say, how did
this tree get so high? Hello, Mrs. Kanga, ma'am.
The tales of Christopher Robin and his menagerie of stuffed nursery companions were the basis for a set of children's verses that became the Winnie the Pooh books.
And so he comes into the office, and he was fantastic on his tape. He really had the essence of Elvis Presley. And so I said, well, do you think you can play him? I mean, do you think you can really play Elvis? He said, no, sure.
I worked on about 12 features, animated on them, and did assistant work on others before then. And after leaving Disney, I like George and Nicholas.
Is your sweater warm enough? Yes, Mother.
When Roo wants to go out and play with Tigger, one thing, he wants to go out and play with Tigger, and I want to say, when Roo wants to go play with Tigger, mostly he wants to go play along, but he's excited, and when he's ready, Kanga really wants to say just a moment, and Roo was really excited, but he was impatient because why the scarf, and this is why it was snowing and everything else, because it doesn't matter when he was impatient, because he loves to play mostly with Tigger and everything else, but it doesn't matter that way if it was fun the most.
We wanted to have, and Walt wanted to have, one kind of an American character that would also bring in the youngsters in America. And Gopher is a very American animal.
Somebody call for an excavation expert? I'm not in the book, but I'm at your service. Gopher. The name is McCord.
There was an effort to put some comedy in, and that was the Gopher.
First thing to be done is get rid of that bear. He's gumming up the whole project.
It was very much like the Badger and Lady and the Tramp. In fact, it was a real takeoff of it.
We were pleased with him, except that we were very nervous about it, because after all, there are Pooh-ophiles. There are people that really adore Winnie the Pooh, particularly in England, and we didn't want to offend anyone. So Larry Clemens came up with this idea. He said, how about if he pops up out of a gopher hole and he says, I'm not in the book, but I'm at your service. Gopher's the name.
Excavation expert who's a gopher. He can dig with his teeth, and I used him like a fellow who comes and takes a bit of the job. And I didn't think of gopher. I just thought of a small-town contractor, and I'll take the job, do a little excavating here. Might have to use dynamite. Yep, measure him.
Big job. Take 2-3 days.
3 days? What about lunches?
Favorites of Walt Disney's daughters. Remembering how much they enjoyed these characters, he was inspired to share them with children around the world. He brought together the many creative talents at the studio to develop and create this film masterpiece.
Warner's made a lot of perfect cartoons. The amazing thing is that they made them on an assembly line. When you think of a perfect work of art, you think about, there's that line about art is never finished, it's taken away, because a real artist is always refining and revising his thoughts and fine-tuning what he does. They didn't have time to do that at Warner Brothers.
We had about 2/3 of what we considered a feature in storyboards. We were in development. Some parts of it were actually in animation, some of the early areas. But we were just really thinking in terms of a total animated feature. And one day we had this major meeting with all the people involved in the Winnie the Pooh project, and Walt said, yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to platform this property. We're not just going to put out a feature. Why? Well, featurette, why? And he says, you'll see. Once we have people aware of the Winnie the Pooh characters, the next time around it'll be much, much bigger. And it'll become classic. It'll become a masterpiece. You watch and see.
With Walt Disney's version, he did get it come true. One of the most feature he got, it's the first feature was the Honey Tree version. Second was the Blustery Day, but now it's the Academy Award. And then the third one, he just got the one that was released, and it's becoming the Kama Hassel name. because now it's became in the 20-second feature film, because now I believed it in this way. Because now I just notice the way I believed in most way. I just believe most ways what I'm a silly narrator does. I just like to do it in most people my ways I do it.
About the Disney studio, and it showed some students or whatever, employees drawing from a model.
To be in the same recording studio with Sterling Holloway was a great treat. I mean, the man was a consummate artist. I used to watch the way he performed. He used to underplay his lines. He would do them so softly and so easily.
Oh, am I glad to see you? It's more friendly with two.
Sterling Holloway was just, well, I was going to say he was a teddy bear. He was like Pooh. He was the human version of Pooh. And Paul Winchell was just a genius.
Incredible talent, whimsy, timing, all the things that require a personality to bounce out of the screen. Paul Winchell has it. But when he gave voice to Tigger, he really did something special.
And I'm Kyle Young. I'm a silly narrator. I'm the voice for myself because I'm the silly narrator. Because instead, with Sebastian Cabot's voice, I'm the silly narrator on books. Because I decide myself, I wanted to be silly. A silly narrator on myself. In most voices on books, I'm a silly narrator on most voices and everything else, and that's why I wanted to become one. Since I became one silly narrator when I was 15 years old, and I had to become one. Then most of all, and I did.
Hey, this is a cinch.
Okay, I'll read it. My name is Yorgos Kyriago Panayotou. That's really how it's said.
It's wonderful.
Yorgos Kyriago Panayotou. To the outside world, I am and always will be known as something else, but it's not my name. As a boy, I haven't read this for ages.
I know.
Walt Disney's inspiration, guidance, and supervision made the film a classic. The inspired artistry is apparent throughout, from the concept art and storyboards to the animation, music, and voices. Actor Sterling Holloway provided the voice for Pooh.
Me, Kyle Young, I'm a silly narrator.
Character actor John Fiedler was Piglet, and the talented Paul Winchell was the voice of Tigger.
You try to see whether you can match some kind of a voice quality to the pictures that you see. I was instructed that Tigger was a very exuberant kind of a character, and that at the same time, he was a very humorous kind of a character. So I tried to put together exuberance, which was a guy who was very excited, all the time, and just with his laugh and everything. The thing that I enjoyed most about the character, I really can't put it into words, but I like Tigger. There's a certain quality that I feel that I became identified with in my own mind, so that instead of just reading the lines, I would always ad-lib. I would always throw in something. Like I threw in one day that, well, TTFN, ta-ta for now, TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Ralph Wright was one of the story guys, and he had a real keen, deep voice. And we wanted Ralph to do the voice for the donkey. And so we recorded it, so he is the voice of Eeyore.
Thanks. There's not much of a tale, but I'm sort of attached to it.
So I created a man in the image of a great friend that the world could love if they chose to, someone who could realize my dreams and make me a star. I called him George Michael, and for almost a decade, he worked his arse off for me and did as he was told.
And the character was basically me. Christopher Robin is a little English boy, and I was a little English boy. So I was basically playing myself at the time.
Hello, Christopher Robin.
Oh, goodness, you're safe.
Someone has pasted Piglet on my window. Well, who to?
We got some static from the British press, and they said there's no such thing as a gopher in England. Walt says there is now.
one of the most things I can say interesting, the most things I can say, one of the most books I wanted to say, I can say the most books I can be a silly narrator teacher, and after all, I wanted to say it's mostly fun. I wanted to be so silly on books, and what can I do? It's fun that I like to do it, after all, and with the books, and so is the movie. It's up to me that I can decide what I would really like to, because I decide what I really like about the movie, and it may be fun, because mostly with that movie, I can explain. I just like the fun of the movie, and especially all the scenes, and of course, the words and everything else, even the lines here. You'll see about how much we enjoy that.
The wonderful thing about figures is figures are wonderful things. The tops are made of the river, the bottoms are made of the springs. The bouncy, flouncy, 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 fun, 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 fun. But the most wonderful thing about figures is I'm the only one. I'm the only one.
The original concept was to develop Pooh as a full-length animated feature, but Walt decided to break the film up into short featurettes. These charming stories were not as familiar to Americans as they were to the British, and Walt believed that Pooh would be much more popular if he was allowed to build up an American following.
The American following I believed in. I can say what the American following is. The American experience, I wanted to say, all Americans believed in Winnie the Pooh. Some kids and adults, all the children everywhere with adults, I can say I will agree with that. 100% what we can do. I can say we can all enjoy the fun, and I will do that, because I like to enjoy mostly fun 100% for the books, the movie, me as a silly narrator, and everything else what I like to do most for fun.
Well, in a very few words, I'll say that I was always ambitious to be associated with the motion picture industry, and my first communication with it was when I was only 6 years old. My mother smuggled me aboard a location bus.
About the Disney studio, and it showed some students or whatever, employees drawing from a model. And I had been sitting home after trips into Idaho with a mining engineer.
3 years later, we put out the second Winnie the Pooh, which was Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day.
And it won the Academy Award.
Not only did it win the Academy Award, it was a very, very, very successful featurette, and Winnie the Pooh became like an established Disney character. I mean, he was as fully accepted around the world as any of the previous characters had been. Now, that was, in a sense, a tribute to Walt Disney, too, because it came out after Walt's death, of course, and yet it was something he had personally been very much involved with. So, although he wasn't there to supervise it, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day was Walt's last great achievement.
With the Academy Award winner on Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, I can say the Academy Awards, it's the winner of all Golden Globe Academy Awards, especially when Disney joined with Pixar. I just say this, when Disney and Pixar just joined along with Toy Story, I just had to say this with Winnie the Pooh. In Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, Walt just looked back about those honeybees. He went to A Bug's Life and joined with Pixar. and looked around with a bug's life. And you see, it's nothing about with the bees. It's about those bugs in Ant Island and everything else, what to do with it. See what they can do in Ant Island and everything else, what they can do. Find a bug life and everything else, and see what they want away from the grasshoppers and everything else. And all they want is more bug life in different way that they want. And the bug difficulty is the grasshoppers. And the bug better way is the ants. And I like it. Because why? The bees from Winnie the Pooh, they wanted their home. And I just believed it that way. So that's why I believed in mostly Pixar that way. It is a bug's life that way. And I do.
And now people refer to it as another Walt Disney masterpiece.
20 you did that year? That was one of 40 that the whole studio did that year? And any one of these cartoons, you'd be proud, or I'd be proud to have, as our epitaph, as I achieved that in my lifetime. I made that great cartoon. They did it all the time.
With that, you get the full-scale grocery store, the meat, deli, bakery, and produce, and this will be the only store in the company that will have a full-line seafood department.
Complete the last sequence. It's very touching and very sentimental. It's a little boy saying goodbye to his childhood, his basic childhood.
This was my first exposure to that story. I didn't know what was coming. Got to that, I'm reading this dialogue and just completely lost it. And that's what you hear in the show.
With the end of the chapter, when the scene, Christopher Robin and Pooh were going to the enchanted place saying goodbye, was the scene. Pooh just wanted to ask that if he wants to go back to page 1 and do it all over again. And I'm the silly narrator. I said this. Yes. I said yes because why? The positive thinker is me. And I just decide this because I decide to think positive on friends, everything that I want to. And I'm friends with everything. Can't you see? I believe most friends, everything, and everything I like to believe in books and everything. Most silly narrators like me, it's because books and everything we just believe friends, and everything else that way is something fun, something more important, something good, something fun, and something excitingly and more important is what I do. And something for fun I believed in. Mostly fun.
And when I saw this as an adult, I'm like, man, that's like the best scene I've ever done. Because it was totally real.
Touring, no question. No question. Yeah, touring is the scariest and most lonely experience that I think most musicians go through.
Yeah? Oh, well, glad to meet you.
Composers Richard and Robert Sherman remember Walt's decision to make featurettes. Walt Disney's prediction did come true. The first featurette was released in 1966 to wide popular acclaim. The second film was even more popular than the first, winning an Academy Award.
By the time when Star Wars was appeared in 1977, before the time Winnie the Pooh was appeared, it was March by the time of the 11th, 1977. It was the big time Star Wars A New Hope appeared. And then it was a day by time Star Wars A New Hope just appeared. And the time was March 11th in 1977 was when Winnie the Pooh is the timeless classic that appeared. And it's the classic that appeared when Star Wars appeared by, and that's the classic. And that's why it came, and that's why I'm a Star Wars fan. And why most George Lucas and Walt Disney believed in, because it's mostly important, because that's the fun, and that's Disney style, and that's more important. So that's the trick and fun. So that's Disney style.
He's not ever nervous on a set because he grew up there. He comes from the old days back at Disney. This is old Hollywood, where if you didn't hit your marks and say your lines exactly as it was in the script, they'd cut.
The old story of Winnie the Pooh to the American public.
There's certainly an honesty and an innocence to these Pooh characters. They aren't putting anything over on anybody. They don't try to put anything over on each other. They're very honest with each other. I think they believe in each other and care for each other. And I think that the kids could get a wonderful lesson from that, and so can grown-ups.
That was Cal Howard's idea when Tex was doing one of the first Daffy Ducks. He wasn't satisfied with the voice, so Cal said, "Why don't you use Leon's voice? He has a slight lisp, and what's it doing, Philip?"
Hello, Rocky. Come on in. King Size Canary is my favorite Tex Avery cartoon. I just love it. And the thing I love about it is every time you think it's gone as far as it could go, it goes further. Until, of course, they have to stop because they ran out of the stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have to end this picture.
When The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh was released as Disney's 22nd feature-length animated film.
The time when Walt Disney's 22nd feature film, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, appeared, it was after Disney's 21 classic Robin Hood, and before the 23rd classic was The Rescuers that appeared. It was the day when Walt Disney created those classics, and the time appeared by, and time again, it was Walt Disney that created those classics than before. It's mostly for fun than those classics that I just believed in mostly of all. So what did I believe in? It's just mostly a good thing since Walt Disney created. It's just mostly the 70s and the decade, and everything else, most decades than ever, for fun, and just noticing for this and becoming this, but along World War II and everything else, but it's not a good thing after all by itself from the war or anything else. Never.
We never will forget our hero of the witch, our quick thinking, unthinking Pooh Bear.
We are proud to present this special commemorative edition marking the 30th anniversary of Pooh's theatrical debut.
We took the phone in the room where we were, and for 5 minutes straight he talked without a bit of stuttering. And after he hung up, I started stuttering again. I said, "Lou, do you mind if I ask you a real personal question, but I've known you a long time?"
I think I animated fairly good, but not one of the top. I wasn't going to be a top animator, and I was turning in a lot of story ideas, so they decided to try me in the story department, and I liked the story department.
Rabbit's very fastidious and fussy, and Owl is a windbag. He talks all the time, but they're all lovable. They're all wonderful. And Pooh, of course, is a bear of very little brain, but he's all love. And it's safety, and it's purity, and it's something I wish we all had more of in this world.
Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray for Winnie the Pooh!
And Piglet, too.
And I believe mostly the way I'd love to. And I'm a silly narrator of all time.
And Piglet, too.